Last night, television history was made when beloved actor Danny DeVito stormed off The Late Show after host Stephen Colbert crossed the line. What started as a simple interview to promote DeVito's new indie film turned into an explosive confrontation that has the internet buzzing and Hollywood insiders talking. Here's what really happened behind the scenes of TV's most shocking moment this year. The studio lights were extra bright last night at The Late Show, but the atmosphere backstage was anything but sunny. Crew members whispered among themselves as they watched their usually cheerful host Stephen Colbert storm through the hallways before the show, snapping at assistants and checking his phone with a scowl. "Something's definitely wrong with him today," one makeup artist told another. "He hasn't smiled once since he got here." The tension only grew as the show's producer announced that Danny DeVito had arrived for his interview. DeVito, the Hollywood legend known for his roles in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and countless classic films, was there to talk about his new indie movie, Last Light on Pine Street, a personal project he'd directed and starred in. DeVito arrived with his small team, smiling and greeting everyone backstage with his famous friendly personality. He handed out small gift bags to the crew, something he was known to do when visiting shows. "These are homemade cookies my daughter made," DeVito explained with a proud smile. "She's the real talent in the family." Everyone laughed except for Colbert, who stayed in his dressing room until the very last minute. When the show began, Colbert went through his opening monologue smoothly enough, making jokes about politics and the day's news. But keen-eyed viewers noticed he seemed off. His timing was rushed, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Then came time for Danny DeVito to be introduced. "Please welcome the star of the new indie film that critics are calling watchable. On a long flight, Danny DeVito," Colbert announced, already setting a strange tone. DeVito walked out smiling and waving to the audience, who gave him a standing ovation. He hugged Colbert, who barely returned the gesture, and sat down looking a bit confused by the cold introduction. "Thanks for having me, Stephen," DeVito said warmly. "It's always great to be here." "Is it?" Colbert replied with an edge to his voice. "Because last time you were supposed to be here, you canceled 2 hours before the show." The audience fell silent. This wasn't part of the usual friendly banter. DeVito looked surprised but kept his smile. "That was 3 years ago and I had food poisoning," DeVito explained calmly. "I sent flowers to apologize, remember?" "Dead flowers," Colbert said, though no one could tell if he was joking. "Anyway, let's talk about this little movie you've made. Last Light on Pine Street. You directed it, starred in it, and even invested your own money. Are you that desperate for work these days?" The audience gasped. This wasn't the Colbert they knew, the host famous for his quick wit but always respectful interviews. DeVito's smile faded, but he kept his cool. "It's a passion project, Stephen. Sometimes in this business you want to tell stories that matter to you personally. This film is about an older man reconnecting with the son he never knew he had. It's about second chances." "Second chances?" Colbert interrupted. "Like your career needed after Dumbo?" The reference to DeVito's role in the Tim Burton film that hadn't performed well at the box office was a clear jab. The audience went from gasps to uncomfortable murmurs. DeVito sat up straighter. "Listen, not every film is a hit, but I'm proud of the work I did in that movie. What's going on here, Stephen? This doesn't feel like a friendly interview." "Just trying to keep it real," Colbert said, shuffling his note cards. "Your movie is about father-son relationships. Speaking of which, I heard your son doesn't even talk to you anymore. Care to comment on that?" The line had been crossed. DeVito's face darkened, and he put down the mug of water he'd been holding. "That's completely untrue," DeVito said firmly. "My children and I have wonderful relationships. I don't know where you got that information, but it's wrong and it's hurtful." "Just something I heard," Colbert shrugged, not backing down. "Hollywood talks." "Well, Hollywood is wrong," DeVito responded, his voice level but serious. I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've done my best to treat people with respect both on and off camera. I came here tonight to talk about a film I care deeply about, not to be insulted with gossip and lies," the audience began, to applaud DeVito's response, clearly on his side. This seemed to irritate Colbert further. 50 years in Hollywood," Colbert said with a smirk. "And what do you have to show for it? A bunch of roles as the funny short guy?" The studio went completely silent. Danny DeVito, known for his good nature and professionalism, was visibly struggling to maintain his composure. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. "I think we need to take a break," DeVito said calmly. "Something's clearly wrong here, and I don't think this interview is going to work out." "Running away from tough questions?" Colbert pressed. "I thought, you were tougher than that, Danny. Or is that just the characters you play?" Before DeVito could respond, the show's producer frantically signaled for a commercial break. The cameras cut away as DeVito stood up, removing his microphone. What happened next would shock viewers and change late-night television forever. As the on-air lights dimmed, crew members rushed onto the set while stunned audience members watched the drama unfold right before their eyes. "What the hell was that?" DeVito asked, his voice low but intense as he stood face-to-face with Colbert. Despite being much shorter, DeVito's presence filled the room. "I've known you for years. This isn't you." Colbert loosened his tie, looking both angry and uncomfortable. "It's just TV, Danny. We're trying to get ratings here, not have a therapy session." The audience, who normally would have been distracted by the applause signs flashing to signal a commercial break, sat in silent witness to this real drama. Many had their phones out, recording everything. "No, this is personal," DeVito pressed, stepping closer. "You've been taking shots at me since I walked out here. Did I do something to upset you?" A producer stepped between them, smiling nervously at the audience. "We'll be back after these messages, folks. Please stay seated." But neither man was backing down. "Maybe I'm just tired of celebrities coming on my show to plug their vanity projects," Colbert said loudly enough for the front rows to hear. DeVito shook his head. "This movie took me 3 years to make. It's about aging and forgiveness. I poured my heart into it." "Well, pour it somewhere else," Colbert snapped. "Nobody wants life lessons from the Penguin." Gasps rippled through the audience. The Batman reference, making fun of one of DeVito's most famous roles, was clearly meant to hurt. DeVito's face flushed red, but his voice stayed steady. "I've played over 100 characters in my career. I've produced films that won Oscars. I've directed. I've worked with the best in the business. And in all those years, I've never been treated with such disrespect by a host." The show's executive producer was now on stage, whispering urgently to Colbert. The host waved him away. "1 minute until we're back," a voice called out. "I'm not continuing this interview," DeVito announced, looking directly at Colbert. "Whatever's going on with you today, I hope you work it out, but I won't be your punching bag." "Fine by me," Colbert replied coldly. "We'll get someone else. Maybe someone whose last hit wasn't in the 90s. That did it." The audience actually booed, something unheard of on The Late Show. Crew members looked at each other in shock. This was career-ending behavior from a host who had built his reputation on being clever but kind. DeVito's publicist rushed to his side, along with the show's producer, who was now pleading with both men. "Steven, please," the producer begged. "We can smooth this over. Let's take 5 minutes, reset, and start the segment again." "Nothing to smooth over," DeVito said calmly, removing his earpiece and handing it to a nearby technician. "I'm done here." As DeVito turned to leave, something unexpected happened. Colbert grabbed his arm to stop him, a move that crossed a physical boundary on live television. "Don't walk away from me," Colbert hissed, his face inches from DeVito's. The studio fell completely silent. Even the crew froze. In that moment, something changed in Danny DeVito's expression, from anger to concern. "You're not okay," DeVito said quietly. "This isn't about me at all, is it?" Before Colbert could respond, security personnel appeared at the edge of the stage, unsure if they should intervene. The situation was unprecedented in the show's history. 30 seconds, called the floor director, panic in his voice. The producer made an executive decision. "Go to the backup segment," he shouted. "Get the band ready." Colbert, suddenly aware of how the situation had spiraled, let go of DeVito's arm. For a brief moment his mask of anger slipped, revealing something that looked like despair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. But only DeVito heard it. DeVito nodded slightly but continued walking off stage, his publicist and 2 security guards now flanking him as he headed toward the exit. The audience watched in stunned silence as one of Hollywood's most respected actors left the stage with dignity, while one of television's most beloved hosts stood alone in the spotlight, his reputation crumbling in real time. Backstage was chaos. Production assistants scrambled to prepare a backup segment. The band leader frantically flipped through music sheets. Executives huddled in corners, already on phones with network higher-ups. In a small green room, DeVito sat quietly as his team buzzed around him. "We need to release a statement," his publicist said, typing furiously on her phone. "This is going to be everywhere by morning." "No statements," DeVito said firmly. "Not tonight." Down the hall, Colbert had locked himself in his dressing room. Producers knocked repeatedly, begging him to come out. The show was still on air, now awkwardly being carried by the band playing extended versions of their usual songs. "Stephen, please," his longtime producer called through the door. "We've got 20 more minutes to fill. The audience is getting restless." Inside, Colbert sat with his head in his hands. On his desk was a newspaper open to a page with the headline, "Late Night Host Faces Personal Crisis as Ratings Plummet." Next to it was a letter that had arrived that morning, private details that had pushed him over the edge. Meanwhile, audience members were posting videos of the confrontation online. Clips were already going viral, with hashtags like "Why Colbert Meltdown" and a DeVito respect trending within minutes. The network executives had arrived at the studio, their faces grim as they huddled with the show's producers. This was more than an awkward interview gone wrong. It was potentially the end of a television era. Back in the green room, DeVito declined calls from major news outlets already seeking comment. Instead, he looked at a framed photo on the wall. Him and Colbert from 5 years earlier, both smiling at a charity event. "Something's really wrong with him," DeVito told his publicist. "This isn't about me." As the backup segment struggled on stage, a production assistant appeared. At the green room door, looking nervous. "Mr. DeVito, Mr. Colbert would like to speak with you. Privately." DeVito's team immediately protested, but he held up his hand to silence them. "Where is he?" DeVito asked. "His dressing room," the assistant replied. He's not doing well, sir." DeVito stood up, straightening his jacket. "Take me to him." As DeVito followed the assistant down the hallway, the audience in the studio began to chant his name, having realized the beloved actor was being forced off the show under mysterious circumstances. The sound echoed through the building, a rumble of support that would soon be amplified 1,000-fold on social media. The assistant stopped at Colbert's dressing room door and knocked gently. "Sir, Mr. DeVito is here." There was silence, then the sound of something being moved inside. The door opened just enough for them to see Colbert's face, his eyes red and his tie undone. "Just Danny," Colbert said, his voice hoarse. "Please." DeVito nodded to his publicist, who had followed at a distance. "I'll be fine," he assured her. "Give us a few minutes." Despite everything that had happened on stage, DeVito stepped into the dressing room without hesitation. The door closed behind him. Inside, the usually immaculate space was a mess. Papers were scattered across the floor. A framed photo lay face down, its glass cracked. Colbert sank into a chair, looking nothing like the confident host who had been so cruel just minutes earlier. "I'm sorry," Colbert said immediately, his voice barely above a whisper. "What I did out there was unforgivable." DeVito remained standing, arms crossed. "You're right about that. But I've known you for 15 years, Stephen. That wasn't you out there. What's going on?" Colbert picked up a crumpled paper from his desk and handed it to DeVito. It was a letter from the network dated that morning. "They're canceling the show," DeVito read aloud, his eyebrows rising. "After 10 years? Why?" "Ratings," Colbert said, flatly. "Younger viewers are leaving late night for streaming shows. The letter says they're replacing me with someone who appeals to a digital native audience." DeVito set the letter down. "So you decided to go out in flames? To take me down with you?" "No." Colbert looked up, horrified. "I never meant. I came in today planning to announce it myself, to leave with dignity. But then I saw this." He passed a newspaper to DeVito. The entertainment section featured a splashy article announcing that DeVito was in talks to launch his own streaming talk show. "They didn't even tell me I was being replaced," Colbert said. "I had to read it in the paper, and then to find out it might be you." DeVito stared at the article, then burst out laughing. Colbert looked at him in confusion. "This is completely fake," DeVito said, tossing the paper aside. "I've never spoken to any streaming service about a talk show. I'm 80 years old, Stephen. The last thing I want is a daily show." "But the article is garbage," DeVito finished. "Someone planted it. Probably the same people who sent you that letter, hoping to cause exactly this kind of blow-up." Colbert's face slowly registered, understanding. "They wanted me to self-destruct on air. And you played right into it," DeVito said, his tone softening. "Look, I don't know if your show is really ending or not, but what happened out there was unforgivable," Colbert finished. "I know. The things I said to you," DeVito sighed, and finally sat down across from Colbert. "You've got 10 minutes to figure out what you're going to do. There's an audience out there, a show still running, and about 100 people filming everything on their phones." Outside they could hear the chanting growing louder. "DeVito! DeVito!" Colbert buried his face in his hands. "I can't go back out there. Not after what I did." "Sure you can," DeVito said simply. "But you have to tell the truth." Colbert looked up, confused. "About the cancellation?" "About being human," DeVito corrected. "About having a bad day and taking it out on the wrong person. People understand that. What they don't understand is cruelty without explanation." Before Colbert could respond, there was an urgent knock at the door. The producer's voice came through, panicked. "Stephen, we're drowning out here. People are starting to leave." DeVito raised an eyebrow at Colbert. "Decision time." In the studio, the band was playing its 5th consecutive song. The audience's chanting had evolved into a slow clap, the universal sign of impatience. Network executives huddled at the edges of the stage, their faces grim. Suddenly the band stopped mid-song. Standing in the center of the stage was Stephen Colbert, his tie still loose and his hair slightly disheveled. Beside him, to the audience's surprise and delight, stood Danny DeVito. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half confused. Colbert raised his hands for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice cracking slightly, "I owe you all an apology, especially to my guest, Danny DeVito." The studio fell silent. This was not standard late-night fare. "Television hosts are supposed to be perfect," Colbert continued. "Always on, always funny, always kind. But sometimes, we're just people having a really bad day." He turned to DeVito, who nodded encouragingly. "Today, I received some news that upset me deeply," Colbert admitted. "And instead of handling it like a professional, I took it out on one of the kindest, most talented people in this business." DeVito placed a hand on Colbert's shoulder. The gesture wasn't lost on the audience, who broke into spontaneous applause. "What you saw earlier wasn't an act," Colbert continued when the clapping subsided. "It was me at my worst moment. But what you're seeing now is something far more important. Forgiveness that I haven't earned, but am grateful to receive." DeVito stepped forward to the microphone. "In 50 years in entertainment, I've seen plenty of bad days. Had quite a few myself. The measure of a person isn't how they act when everything's great. It's what they do after they mess up." The audience was completely silent now, witnessing something real in an industry built on illusion. "So," DeVito continued, looking at Colbert with genuine warmth, "how about we try this interview again? My movie's still coming out on Friday." The tension in the room broke as laughter rippled through the audience. Colbert's face showed genuine relief as he gestured to the guest chairs. "Danny DeVito, everyone!" This time, as they sat down, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Colbert's questions were thoughtful, engaging, allowing DeVito to speak passionately about his indie film and the themes of redemption that now seemed especially relevant. When the segment ended, the audience gave them both a standing ovation, not for the practiced banter of typical late-night TV, but for the authenticity of what they had witnessed. Backstage, as crew members breathed sighs of relief, DeVito and Colbert shook hands. "Thank you," Colbert said simply. "Don't mention it," DeVito replied. "But about that letter—" "Already called my agent," Colbert said with a small smile. "Turns out the network was testing my reaction. The show isn't canceled. They were gauging whether I still cared enough to fight for it." "And do you?" DeVito asked. Colbert looked back toward the stage, where the audience was still applauding. "I think I just showed them that I do." The next morning, clips of the confrontation and the remarkable reconciliation dominated social media. What could have ended a career instead became a pivotal moment in late-night television history. A rare glimpse of genuine human emotion cutting through the polished veneer of celebrity culture. Critics and viewers alike praised both men. Colbert for his honesty and humility, DeVito for his graciousness and wisdom. The incident even boosted ticket sales for DeVito's indie film, which would go on to become his most successful directorial project to date. As for The Late Show, its ratings saw their biggest spike in 5 years, proving that in an age of carefully curated content, audiences still hunger for something real, even when it begins with a moment everyone would rather forget. Sometimes, the most memorable television isn't about perfect jokes or flawless performances. Sometimes, it's about watching real people navigate the messy, complicated business of being human, right before our eyes.